After all my emotions were taken away, I couldn't understand why she cried. The day Candy and Julian went public with their relationship, the system declared my mission a failure and stripped me of all my emotions. From that moment on, I could no longer feel the sting of betrayal, and I lived with a newfound sense of freedom. Yet, she was the one who cried her eyes out when she saw me painting for someone else, snatching my brush and demanding through her tears, "You said you would only ever love me. How could you stop loving me?" But I just furrowed my brow, genuinely confused as to why she was crying. When Candy and Julian officially announced their engagement, the system determined my mission had failed. A robotic electronic tone echoed in my mind, followed by a searing pain. I collapsed to the floor, my eyes glued to the live broadcast on the television. Candy was presenting the award to Julian herself. On stage, they embraced and held hands. Then Julian smiled as he answered questions from the press. They looked like a perfect couple under the bright spotlights. A reporter playfully asked Candy if she had been waiting all these years for Julian to win this award. The Vanderbilts were a family with a long legacy in the arts. Anyone hoping to marry into their circle needed to have the credentials to match. The award Julian won today was his golden ticket into the Vanderbilt family. Candy gently took Julian's arm and said, "It wasn't waiting, it was growing together. Our relationship, much like the painting The Chase, is about a bold and passionate devotion. I would love him with or without this award." The press went wild. Julian looked at her, visibly moved. While Candy claimed status didn't matter, this was the first time she had ever publicly acknowledged him. For a family like hers, pedigree was everything, and Julian, unlike me, came from nothing. The painting appeared on the screen behind them. My eyes were drawn to it against my will. The surrealist style, the intense yet delicate emotion, it was the best piece I had ever created. It was also the only piece I had ever begged her not to take from me. Ever since Julian's hand was injured, all he had to do was shed a few tears, and Candy would give him anything he wanted. He had told her, "Candy, with this painting, I can win the award. Then I'll finally be worthy of you. Candy, after I win, I won't need him to paint for me anymore. You'll help me keep this a secret, to make sure no one ever finds out, right?" Candy had stood before me for a long time before finally letting out a soft sigh. "Sonny, you owe him this." And so, my right hand was ruined, and I was kept a prisoner in that mansion. All the world knew was that the Warren family had collapsed, and that the artist Sonny Warren had retired 3 years ago after a career-ending injury to his hand. Meanwhile, Julian Croft was the dark horse who had burst onto the scene in those same 3 years. Now, riding the coattails of my work, he had fame, fortune, and a path to marry into the Vanderbilt family. It was laughable. I tried to smirk at the screen, but my face felt stiff, so I let it go. "System, I'm sorry, I failed." The system was silent for a moment before replying. "It's all right, but as we agreed, I must now take something from you." I gave a bitter smile, accepting my fate. "A deal's a deal. Go ahead." On the stage, Julian dropped to one knee, proposing to Candy in front of all the cameras. The lens captured a flicker of shock on the face of Candy, the woman who supposedly adored him. I never heard her answer, because at that moment the system said, "I am taking all of your emotions. Once they are gone, you will never feel pain again." That sounded wonderful. Once all emotions were removed, the process was irreversible. I would never again experience happiness, sadness, or anger for the rest of my life. As the extraction began, memories flickered before my eyes. The Warrens and the Vanderbilts were old family friends. Candy and I grew up together, and loving her felt as natural as breathing. But at some point, a boy named Julian Croft appeared by her side, the side that used to be reserved for me. He had no family name, no connections, not even any basic training as an artist. But he was handsome, and when he looked at Candy with tears welling in his eyes, looking so helpless, he inspired a deep sense of pity. He said he wanted to learn how to paint, so Candy casually gave him the professional art set I had gifted her years ago. He said he wanted to study under a great master, so Candy begged me for one of my paintings, stamped his name on it, and used it to secure him an apprenticeship. Whenever I questioned her, she would just say, "He's had such a hard life, Sonny. Things like this are nothing to us. Just help him." And with one favor after another, the two of them grew closer. Candy, who had been sheltered her whole life, started following him to food trucks in rundown neighborhoods. She would beam over a $2 flower from a street vendor and talk about how liberating it was to get caught in the rain with him. She told me that Julian was the only person who was truly genuine with her, that only with him did she feel alive. I watched her walk away from me time and time again, and each time I poured my raging emotions onto a canvas. That was how the chase began to take shape. Every time she chose him over me, I added another layer of paint, another stroke of anguish. In the end, that masterpiece of color and heartbreak became nothing more than Julian's stepping stone to success. It was so absurd. Things never should have gotten this bad. But then came the accident, where Julian injured his hands, saving us. From that day forward, I was cast as the villain who owed him an eternal debt. She had told me, "Sonny, you owe him for the rest of your life. What right do you have to remain in the art world?" And so, from that day on, the official story was that Sonny Warren had retired after a tragic accident, and a young artist named Julian Croft, with a remarkably similar style, began his meteoric rise. Amidst the agony of the emotional extraction, I asked in a trembling voice, "System, do you think my debt is paid?" The system was silent for a moment, and for the first time, its cold, mechanical voice seemed to hold a trace of sympathy. "Sonny, you don't owe anyone anything." "Really?" "But they all told me it was my fault." Tears streamed down my face as I felt something essential being pulled from my very core. Then, everything went black, and I passed out on the floor. When I came to, the first thing I saw was Candy walking through the door. She was on Julian's arm, and she looked at me with annoyance. "Sonny, can you stop pulling these fainting spells? It's so childish." Her voice was cold, but I felt no pain from her words. I barely registered her presence. I absently touched my chest. The heavy weight that had been sitting there for years was gone. My whole body felt lighter, more at ease. "Sonny, I proposed to Candy," Julian began, his voice trailing off as if in humble reverence. "You know I've loved her for so long, I just couldn't help myself." He sounded meek, but his eyes were filled with pure provocation. "My mentor? My master only ever took on one apprentice, me. So where did you come from? Are you referring to how you pass my paintings off as your own, and then tell the press you're my protege?" Julian's face went white, and a flash of hatred crossed his eyes. "Sonny, apologize," Candy demanded, defending her precious Julian. Her anger didn't cause the slightest ripple within me. I looked at the two of them, baffled. "And another thing, if you're going to propose, just do it. Why is a grown man telling me he couldn't help himself? I'm not interested in you." It was so strange. I didn't care if they got engaged or even married. It had nothing to do with me. To them, my detached words sounded like sarcasm born from rage. Julian stepped forward, a look of self-reproach on his face. "I know you must be hurting, Sonny. I know I took your place with your mentor, but back then, if things hadn't been so desperate, I never would have destroyed my own hands. Did I ask you to save me?" I asked flatly. Julian froze, taking an awkward step back before shooting a wounded look at Candy. "Candy, I think Sonny resents me," he murmured, his eyes turning red with what looked like genuine emotion. To me, it was just a blank slate. I truly couldn't comprehend why his performance made Candy so furious on his behalf. "Sonny, the man saved your life. If you can't be grateful, at least have a conscience. Don't repay his kindness with cruelty." Cruelty? My only memory was of him taking my art to build his own fame and fortune. How was I the cruel one? I stared at her, my expression completely blank, my eyes devoid of any emotion. In the past, this would have been the moment I'd ask in agony what more she wanted from me, what else I had to surrender to him. But today, I just watched her impassively until she was the one who broke eye contact. I thought for a moment, then said, "Aren't you the ones being cruel? The ones who took everything and are still playing the victim? Your family, the Vanderbilts, begged me to go get you that day. When we crashed, help was already on the way. He was the one who insisted on punching through the window. What did that have to do with me? You use it to guilt me and build his career on my back. From where I'm standing, you're the ones who are cruel. Sonny, you." As they both stared at me, fuming with humiliation, I calmly pulled the blanket over my head and lay back down. I felt nothing. No love, no hate. It was wonderful. My reaction was clearly not what they expected. They stared at my unmoving form under the covers. Candy's voice was laced with anger. "Is this how you're going to be? You hate the sight of me that much. Fine. Julian doesn't need you anymore. If you really can't stand to see us, then you can leave. Did you hear me, Sonny? If you keep this up, I'm done with you. Your hand is useless now. You should think carefully about your next move. Unless you apologize to Julian right now, The old me would have been terrified of those words. After my family lost everything, she was all I had left. The guilt and the devastation had made me completely dependent on her. But now, I quickly poked my head out from under the blanket. Leave? Okay. Without another word, I pushed past them and started gathering my things. I could hear them arguing behind me, but I didn't look back. I grabbed my wallet and my bank card and walked right out the door. Wait, the system's voice said in my head. I stopped at the gate of the mansion. A vase came crashing down from above, shattering into 1,000 pieces right in front of me. I looked up to the balcony and saw Julian and Candy. Sonny, I'm sorry. I couldn't stop her, Julian said. So was Candy. I guess you really did hate me that much. Sonny, you can walk out of here today, but I'm warning you, if you dare say a word to anyone about this. I just looked at her calmly and replied with a single word. Pathetic. I ordered an Uber on my phone and started walking down the long, winding driveway from the mansion. No one followed me, which was a relief. The autumn air was crisp and clear, but my mind kept replaying memories. During the height of Candy and Julian's affair, her family was completely against it. Old Mr. Vanderbilt, relying on our family's long friendship, held my hand from his hospital bed. He pleaded with me, his voice frail. Sonny, my boy, I've watched you two grow up. You know Candy has real talent. She's the only direct heir to the Vanderbilt legacy. Please, help me bring her back. The man I called Grandpa my whole life was begging me with tears in his eyes. I couldn't refuse. I drove out to find her. I found her in a rundown apartment in a rough neighborhood, having abandoned her inheritance to try and bring art to the underprivileged. She had been so sheltered her whole life. She thought the world was full of tragic figures like Julian, people with big dreams, but no means to achieve them. In a place like this, art was worthless. If they weren't giving away free groceries as part of the art workshop, no one would have even shown up. Everyone look, she'd say, holding up a print. This is something I did when I was just starting out. If you just apply yourselves, she got no respect. Hey lady, how much is that thing worth? My kid could draw better than that. Whoa, is that person naked? Someone would shout, followed by laughter. In those moments, she would look over at Julian with hurt in her eyes. He would give her an encouraging nod, and she would take a deep breath and carry on. That is, until I pushed my way into the cramped room and, with a grim expression, dragged her out of there. When Julian tried to stop me, I was so furious I punched him to the ground, then pulled Candy into my car. Your grandfather is dying. Yilde here. And you're still wasting your time with him in a place like this? We had known each other our entire lives, but she screamed back at me. What do you know? I'm making art accessible. It shouldn't just be for the rich. Everyone has a right to it. She was convinced of her own righteousness, screaming and hitting me as I forced her into the car. I locked the doors, terrified Mr. Vanderbilt wouldn't hold on, and sped onto the freeway. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw Julian chasing us in a beat-up van. Stop the car. I won't go back with him. My grandfather is always trying to trick me. I'm not falling for it this time. Stop. When she realized I wasn't stopping, she started grabbing for the steering wheel. The car swerved wildly across the lanes. I couldn't fight her off, and with one final, violent shove, she sent our car directly into the path of an oncoming sedan. There was a deafening crash, and the impact knocked me out cold. When I regained consciousness, Julian was already outside, frantically banging on the car window. The doors were jammed shut. Candy was crying, pleading with him for help through the glass. I fought through the pain, trying to comfort her, but she just shoved me back into my seat. This is all your fault, she screamed. If you hadn't dragged me away, this never would have happened. We're going to die in here. No, we're not. I tried to soothe her gently. My phone buzzed with a message from the family's driver. They had a GPS tracker on the car and rescue was already en route. But just then, Julian started punching the car window with his bare fists. He hit it again and again, his knuckles splitting and bleeding, until tiny cracks started to spiderweb across the safety glass. And with every punch, Candy sobbed even harder. In that moment, I knew I could never compete with Julian. He never actually broke the glass. The paramedics arrived and cut us out of the car first. None of us were seriously hurt, but he had fractured bones in both hands. He would never be able to hold a paintbrush again. This is all your fault, Sonny. Candy had screamed at me later. Do you have any idea how hard Julian worked? How badly he wanted to be an artist? You destroyed him. You owe him for the rest of your life, Sonny. Why do you have to even be in the art world? And to make matters worse, when Mr. Vanderbilt heard the news of the crash from his hospital bed, He had a heart attack and passed away. Buried under an avalanche of accusations, I began to doubt myself. Was I really the cause of all this tragedy? Was it my own selfishness, my own possessiveness, that had led to this irreversible disaster? So, as penance, I agreed to their demands. I retired from the art world, and all my future paintings would be credited to Julian Croft. Later, when the Warren family fortune collapsed and I had nowhere else to go, their demand for new work grew, and I became their prisoner in that secluded mansion, until they found the chase. For the first time, I begged Candy to let me keep just one painting for myself. In response, they had someone sever the tendons in my right hand, ensuring I could never hold a brush again. "Sonny, you're pathetic," a voice in my head said, but I felt nothing. "Don't be so hard on your past self," the system's voice said. "You went through a lot. It's a good thing it was your emotions we removed. In a way, it's a blessing. Sonny, I'm leaving now. I hope that without the burden of feelings, you can find something truly precious." And then the system was gone. But I didn't understand. What was something precious? "Mr. Warren, are you the one who called for a ride?" A car pulled up beside me, and the window rolled down to reveal a young woman with her hair in a ponytail. "That's me." I got in. She asked where I was headed. I hesitated, then noticed a brochure on the seat for Santa Fe. "Take me to Santa Fe," I said. "Just find me a bed and breakfast to draw me off at." "What a coincidence. My family runs a BB there," she said cheerfully. "I'm just covering a shift for my dad today. I never thought I'd get a pickup from one of these mansions. I hear everyone who lives up here is a millionaire." "What do you do for a living, sir?" She was very talkative. Perhaps because I had no emotions, I didn't even feel annoyed. I just listened quietly as she chattered on. Her name was Annie, and her family's BB was called Annie's Place. When we arrived, she enthusiastically showed me inside. The courtyard was filled with blooming bougainvillea, bursting with life, both vibrant and beautiful. I decided to stay. The money on my card was more than enough to live in a place like this for the rest of my life. Annie helped me buy some essentials and then showed me around the historic town. "Mrs. Gable, this is my new guest. Isn't he more handsome than the guys on TV? Mr. Peterson, look, handsome, right? He's staying at our place." Within a few hours, it seemed like everyone in the historic district knew that Annie's Place had a new guest. I bought new art supplies and spent my days in the courtyard, teaching myself to paint with my left hand. The results weren't nearly as good as what I could do with my right. The old Sonny would have been consumed with frustration at this clumsy new level, but now I couldn't even feel anger. Annie insisted on framing every single one of my paintings and hanging them along the hallways and stairwell of the BB. She said she could tell I was a real artist and that she was just getting a good deal, telling me not to mind. I didn't know what it meant to mind, but she seemed to quickly realize I was different. I would often get taken advantage of, but I didn't seem to have any emotional reaction. The local kids would sometimes run off with my art supplies or make faces at me. Because I never got angry or chased them, some even started wandering into the courtyard to rifle through my belongings. Whenever that happened, Annie would grab a broom from the porch and chase them down the street. "Hey, you're messing with the wrong person. You don't get to bully my people," she'd yell. She would always get my things back, then turn to me and call my expressionless face a blockhead. She would leave a bowl of soup outside my door in the evenings. If she found out a shopkeeper had overcharged me, she would march me back there to demand a refund. She'd bring in my laundry if it looked like rain. The way she looked at me was strange, and the neighbors would tease her. "Annie's a goner. That boy has completely stolen her heart." She would just blush, look at me, and laugh as she shooed them away. I didn't know if this was the precious thing the system had mentioned, but Candy's own precious love, Julian, found me first. He stood for a long time in the hallway, looking at my paintings on the wall. When he saw me, he said with a sneer, "I guess anyone can call themselves a painter these days. This stuff on the wall isn't a tenth as good as your old work, is it, Sonny?" I didn't respond. I just shook my head at a fuming Annie, who shot Julian a dirty look before storming inside. The BB was small, and he scanned the courtyard with disdain before handing me a gold-embossed invitation. "Sonny, Candy and I are having our engagement party. This is the invitation. I was hoping you would come and be a witness for us." He smirked. "After all, you two were childhood friends. You were even engaged to her once. It would be best to clear the air at the party, don't you think?" I nodded slightly. "All right." When he saw my flat tone and complete lack of reaction, he frowned, clearly annoyed. "Oh, and Sonny, Maestro Du Bois saw the chase. He's officially taken me on as his apprentice. I have you to thank for that. His smile was pure provocation, but I remained impassive. "It's fine," I said. "If you feel guilty about it, you can just send me some money." He stared at me, momentarily stunned. "Sonny, have things gotten that bad for you? No wonder you're living in a place like this. The Warrens used to be one of the most respected families, and now look at you." He seemed to be trying every angle to get a reaction out of me, but all I could think was that he talked a lot, even more than Annie. If I still had my emotions, I would have done what I'd done countless times before. I would have punched him, screaming that he'd already taken my name, my career, and my hand, that I owed him nothing, so what more could he possibly want? Then Candy would appear, and he would start crying, talking about his sacrifice, and I would once again be painted as the ungrateful monster. Thinking about it now, not having emotions saved me a lot of trouble. I took the invitation. "I'll be there," I said. "Just make sure to send a car for me." 3 days later, a black car arrived to pick me up. Annie grabbed my hand, her face flushed with anger. "Don't go, Sonny. How can you stand to be around such awful people?" She had overheard my entire conversation with Julian that day. When I got to the part about them having my tendons severed, she had gotten so angry, she'd slammed her hands on the table and knocked it over. I didn't understand what was so upsetting. "I should still go," I told her. I didn't care about the wedding, but it was a free meal, and they would probably have good cake. When I arrived, the party was already crowded. When Candy saw me, she froze for a second before composing herself. "Sonny, I didn't think you'd actually come." She was wearing a beautiful white dress, but her expression was complex. "Julian said he'd pay me to be a witness. I have to show up to get the official wedding invitation." She pressed her lips together, a flicker of anger in her eyes. For a moment, I thought I saw something else there too, something that looked like pain, but I must have been mistaken. How strange. Had they not agreed on my fee? People were starting to stare at me, their expressions a mixture of pity and excitement. I could hear them whispering. It seemed they were all waiting for me to make a scene and try to steal the bride. But why would I do that? I didn't care about her. In fact, I didn't care about anyone. Julian came over, took Candy by the hand with a smile, and began the official announcements. A string quartet began to play. Just as the couple took their place on the small stage, a man suddenly rushed forward from the crowd. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Amid the panicked shouts, Julian saw the glint of a knife in the man's hand and, without thinking, shoved Candy directly in front of him. I was standing close to the stage, and though I felt no fear or love, years of instinct to protect her took over. In that split second, I lunged forward and kicked the attacker squarely in the chest. He fell to the ground, and security guards immediately swarmed and subdued him. Kenny stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. I think she was remembering something. When we were children, we were in a kidnapping attempt, and when a man came at us with a knife, I had stood in front of her without a second thought. Julian rushed over and helped her to her feet, but her eyes, filled with an unmistakable disappointment, never left me. I paused for a moment, then decided to head back to the dessert table. The cake was really good, and I wanted to grab another slice. But the man on the floor started yelling, "Julian, you can't just forget about me now that you've made it. If it wasn't for me digging up all that information on Miss Vanderbilt for you, you never would have gotten close to her." Julian flew into a rage. "Shut up," he screamed. "That's ridiculous. Security, get him out of here." "Wait," Candy said, her voice sharp. She stared at Julian, her expression hard as stone, as if searching his face for the truth. "Did you just push me?" The disappointment in her voice was so palpable that Julian began to stammer an explanation. "No, that's not it. Let me explain, Candy. Please, I love you. I was just so scared," he pleaded. The man on the floor laughed. "Love? You don't love anyone, Julian. That car crash with her and the other guy? You're the one who paid me to cut the brake lines on his car. Stop pretending. Now that you're on top, you think you could just get rid of me? You even sent people to kill me. No way. If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me." Julian grabbed at his hair, screaming hysterically, "Shut up. Just shut up." The entire party was watching the drama unfold, which meant no one was by the dessert table. I hesitated for a second, then decided to grab a couple of extra cupcakes to bring back for Annie. The attacker was dragged away, and then the Vanderbilt security guards escorted a still protesting Julian out as well. People were so strange. Candy, ever the Vanderbilt heir, quickly took control of the situation, calming the guests. Then she walked over to me. She seemed uncertain, opening her mouth to speak a few times before finally managing. "Thank you. But why did you save me?" "I don't know. Instinct, I guess, I said honestly. For some reason. My answer made her eyes well up with tears. You don't hate me? I shook my head. She stared into my cold, indifferent eyes, as if trying to find some hidden meaning in my words. And she just stood there, frozen. After a long moment, she asked, Sonny, isn't there anything you want to ask me? I thought about it for a second, then asked her with genuine curiosity. When do I get the official wedding invitation? And how much am I getting paid for being a witness? Her eyes trembled, and the look on her face was one of utter devastation, as if her entire worldview had just shattered. She stared at me in disbelief, an aura of pain radiating from her. I just watched her silently. When it became clear she wasn't going to say anything else, I turned and left with my cupcakes. I went back to the BB. Annie was delighted with the cupcakes. Her good mood didn't last long, however, because Candy showed up a little while later. The moment Annie saw her, she turned to me and asked, Is that her? The evil woman who cheated on you and had your hand ruined? Kenny looked mortified, but I just nodded. Sonny, Candy started. So, you finally realize your new boyfriend was just a con artist who used you, and now you want to come crawling back. Annie said, her words sharp and precise. It saved me the trouble of having to say it myself. Candy's expression soured. She gave me a look that was a mixture of pain and longing, but when I remained unmoved, her tone turned icy as she addressed Annie. This is between Sonny and me. Would you please give us a moment? I figured a fight between them would be a hassle, so I made an excuse for Annie to leave. The moon was bright, and the sweet scent of jasmine filled the night air. She looked at my blank face, her own expression filled with emotion, and tears began to stream down her cheeks. Sonny, it was all a lie. Everything about Julian was a lie. He deceived me. He doesn't care about art, and he never loved me. He only loved my name, my money, the career I could give him. She was sobbing uncontrollably, but I just stood there, completely unmoved. Oh, I said, was there something else? She had been crying for a while, and Annie's soup was probably ready. She clearly wasn't used to my new way of speaking. She tugged on my sleeve, about to fall into my arms the way she always used to, but I took 2 steps back. She froze, her hand still outstretched. Sonny, is it that you can't forgive me? Do you hate me? I shook my head. A flicker of hope sparked in her eyes. Then, do you still love me? I just stared at her blankly, my eyes probably clearer and colder than the moonlight, holding neither hate nor love. Sonny, what's wrong with you? All you ever wanted was for me to love you. I'm here now. Why do you stop loving me? Love? It was a shame, but I didn't need that anymore. After she left that day, she rented the house next door. She started coming over every single day, which annoyed Annie so much that she put a sign on our gate, no trespassing. This means you ungrateful, manipulative people. She seemed to get used to my coldness. She just followed me around all day, watching me paint with my left hand, watching me wander the town with my art case. She hired the best doctors for me, not just for my hand, but she also insisted I see a neurologist. I refused all treatment for my hand and for my head. Painting with my left hand was fine. I had no desire to feel pain ever again. Sometimes when Annie was out, she would sit beside me and reminisce. Do you remember? That time you flew all the way to an auction in Paris to buy me an original piece by my favorite French painter, all just so I would spend one day with you instead of Julian. When my family grounded me for seeing him, you climbed up the trellis to my 3rd-floor window just to toss me snacks. The year the Warrens lost everything, you worked as a busboy for 3 months just to save up enough money to buy me a birthday present. I cut her off, my voice cold. I remember, Miss Vanderbilt. You talk a lot. You're interrupting my work. A flicker of pain crossed her face. She looked at me, wanting to say more, but held her tongue. I added, You used to say I did those things because I loved you. So, the fact that I no longer want to do anything for you must mean I don't love you anymore. Her face went pale, and she shook her head in disbelief. That's impossible. You can't stop loving me. You promised you would love me forever, she insisted. You just haven't forgiven me yet. That's all it is. Yes, that's it. This is all Julian's fault. He's the one who came between us. She disappeared for a while after that. Soon, the news broke that Julian Croft, the art world's rising star, had been sentenced to prison for plagiarism. The Vanderbilts controlled the media narrative, and overnight, the celebrated prodigy became a reviled fraud. I felt neither sadness nor joy. I just picked up my brush with my left hand and began to paint Annie, who had fallen asleep in a lounge chair in the garden. She wore no jewelry, just a simple tie-dye dress, her long hair slightly curled. but she possessed something that drew me in, a powerful life force. Even without emotions, being around her was more comfortable than being around anyone else. I was in the middle of a stroke when the brush was suddenly snatched from my hand. Sonny, what are you doing? How could you paint her? You promised you would only ever paint for me. I looked at Candy, my expression as still as a pond. Sonny, you promised you would always love me. You can't stop. I've already taken care of Julian. We can get married now, okay? Okay. Nothing about that is okay. Get away from him, you awful, selfish woman. Annie had woken up and was now standing between me and Candy, glaring at her defiantly. Who do you think you are to stand in my way? Candy snapped and gestured for her security to take me. I didn't want them to fight, so I went willingly. It didn't matter to me where I lived. But as I looked back at Annie standing in the doorway, I felt a strange stirring in my empty chest. For a fleeting moment, I thought that if I were capable of feelings, I probably would have fallen in love with her. But I wasn't, so it was better not to waste her time. Candy started spending all her time with me. She announced to the world that we would be married in 2 weeks. I didn't argue. I just asked her, but you know that I don't love you, right? She tried again to use our past to prove that I still loved her. It was tedious. Fine, I get it, I said. I was brought back to the main Vanderbilt estate. If I married her, I would become the only other legal heir to the entire Vanderbilt fortune. A lot of people, besides her, were not happy about this. When I met her younger sister, Candace, I could tell she was up to something. So you must be my future brother-in-law, she said slyly. I heard you and my sister were childhood sweethearts who had a tragic falling out, but are now finally back on the right path. I didn't answer her. Candy had fed the press several versions of our story, but in every single one, I was portrayed as being hopelessly devoted to her. The whole world thinks you're the world's most romantic man, and that you and my sister are a story of true love conquering all, Candace continued. But from where I'm standing, you don't seem to like her at all. She leaned in close, lowering her voice to a whisper. You need to think this through. Whether this love is real or fake, once you marry into the Vanderbilt family, there's no going back. You won't be able to live in a quiet town like Santa Fe, carrying your easel around, and you'll never meet another girl like Annie. Her eyes glinted. So, are you really content to stay here? It seemed like a reasonable question. I had no desire to marry Candy. The night before the wedding, Candace arranged for my escape. She told me she had picked out a special place for me to go, and that I should just trust her contact. It wasn't until I got off the plane that I realized where she'd sent me. Catalina Island, off the coast of California. The island was full of tourists and citrus groves. I tried my best to mimic the happy expressions of the people around me, but it was no use. Besides a stiff, forced smile, I felt nothing. That is, until someone in a giant lemon mascot costume took my hand. I looked into the eyes of the costume, and my empty heart felt a jolt. Hey, blockhead, want to paint some lemons? It was Annie. I remember Candace saying she had a gift for me. I guess this was it. I stayed on the island with her for a long time, but in the end, I took her back to the mainland. Annie, you're a wonderful person, I told her, but you must see by now that I'm not capable of loving anyone. Annie stood in the doorway of her BB, tears in her eyes, but she forced a smile. I know you, blockhead. You're too dense. You might never learn how to love someone, but that's okay. We can always be friends. She said that if I ever got tired of wandering, I could always come back. She and her little courtyard would always be there. After that, I went to Europe. I traveled from one country to the next, embarking on a new journey. France, Italy, Spain, all the way to the Arctic Circle. I never knew where I was going next. All I knew was that I didn't want to stop, and so I walked and I painted. I created clumsy landscapes with my left hand, strapped them to my back, and set out for the next horizon. There was no love in my life, only the road ahead. Epilogue, Candy. I've loved 2 men in my life. One was Sonny Warren, my childhood friend. The other was Julian Croft, a complete fraud. When I met Julian, I couldn't imagine that someone who had suffered so much could still have such a passionate love for art. Aside from his background, he seemed perfect, like he was tailor-made for me. He could read my every mood from a single glance. As the Vanderbilt heir, my entire childhood was filled with criticism and impossible standards. But he was different. He was the only one who ever gave me unconditional encouragement and support. And then there was the accident where he was so desperate to save me that he destroyed his own hands. I thought then that I could never abandon him. But it turns out that if someone shows up in your life and seems absolutely perfect, it's because they've done their homework. It was all a lie. Every last bit of it. His love for me, his artistic integrity, his tragic resilience, it was all an act. He only loved my family name and the power it gave him. And for that lie, I betrayed Sonny countless times. I always knew he loved me. The moment I saw the chase, I knew it was a declaration of his fierce, all-consuming love for me. But I chose to ignore it. I needed someone to blame for the accident, for my grandfather's death, for my own guilt. I needed a scapegoat so I could justify using Sonny, so I could pretend not to see the love he was offering me. I failed him so terribly. By the time I realized that the unwavering, gentle support I had always craved had never come from Julian, but from Sonny, it was too late. He didn't love me anymore. Or more accurately, he was no longer capable of loving anyone at all. It's as if someone had surgically removed his emotions. He was completely indifferent to me, even when I begged for his forgiveness, even when I told the world we were getting married. I knew my sister Candace had met with him. I knew she helped him escape. But I didn't try to stop him. Because that girl, Annie, was right. I was the one who destroyed him. I destroyed his ability to love, ensuring he could never feel that way about anyone ever again. I had no right to take away the rest of his life, too. She was right. And so, I watched from a distance as he boarded that plane. I don't know how to atone for what I've done, and I know I don't have the right to ever be in his life again. So I've chosen to watch from afar. I know he travels from one place to the next, always moving. I just hope that if he ever decides to look back, he'll see me waiting. I would take his hatred over his indifference. Anything, as long as he still felt something for me. As long as he didn't look at me with those empty eyes. If I ever see him again, I won't say, "Sonny, I love you." I'll say, "Sonny, I'm sorry."